Hello, my name is Ty Gallagher, and I'll be telling you a little bit about my DKP Manager project. So to start things off, let me briefly explain what DKP is for those who aren't familiar with it. DKP stands for Dragon Kill Points, which is a socially constructed currency commonly used in MMOs. Typically, these points are earned through participation in various group activities. These points are then spent by the players to purchase items and get the gear that the group may discover during their activities. Despite how popular the system is, most MMOs don't have built-in support for DKP, which creates one of the biggest downsides of using the system, which is that players are responsible for managing the points themselves. To combat this, I've created a system that uses a database to track the points among members of the guild, as well as create a table of all the transactions that occur within the database, so anyone can verify how things got to be the way that they are. So let me go over the schemas really quickly. Firstly, we have a player schema, which simply consists of a player ID for uniqueness, the player's total DKP, and their name. Next we have characters, which again contains a character ID for uniqueness, a few items about the character for context, the character's name, which must also be unique, and two foreign keys, a player ID key which links the schema to the previous one, and a role key which I'll explain now. The role schema only has two elements, the role name, which must be unique and is the primary key, and a multiplier value, which allows groups to customize the amount of DKP a given role earns based on its demand. Next we have an item schema, which essentially acts as a set of descriptors for a transaction, and gives more context when people are looking for that specific transaction later. Lastly, we have the transaction schema itself, which is essentially the bread and butter of this whole database. This one consists of an incrementing transaction ID for uniqueness, a cost integer, a date-time variable that's generated at the time of each transaction, and three foreign keys. The first two, buyer ID and seller ID, both serve to link player IDs together inside of the transaction, and then the item ID, like I mentioned before, gives some context to the whole thing. So let me touch briefly on one more thing about this database. Inside it there is an entity which I call the banker, which is responsible for basically the generation of DKP within the system. It does this by having just an absurd amount and having the only transaction in the entire database that is not kept within the transaction table. And that's basically him getting all of the DKP at the very start before the systems are even in place. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into it here. So if I hit run, it'll pop up the main menu here. Now this is a little bit busy, but this can basically be used to run the entire application if you really wanted to. In the middle we have two basically identical lists here. From here we can use the buttons over here, the buyer and seller balance, to get the balance of whatever we have selected here. And we can see the banker has a huge amount of DKP, and Strong has a pretty good amount. Let's use Pasty here. And let me see how much Tommy has. Tommy has 0, so let's go ahead and we'll fix that. Say Tommy was doing pretty good earlier, so he gets 500 DKP. I hit transact there, but it doesn't really give us any indication until we look at the actual balance. We can see that he now has 500 when he had 0 before, and we can check over here just to make sure. So let's say that Pasty has something that Tommy really likes. So before, I just left this the way that it was. Bank is basically like a generic one, so that we can identify transactions that were just between the banker and somebody and the banker. It's basically just for moving DKP around. But let's say Pasty has a nice mace that Tommy wants, so we can hit transact here. Tommy now has 0, and Pasty now has 900. And if we train dude again, we'll actually get an error that tells us that Tommy doesn't have enough DKP for that transaction. So that's all well and good, but let's say we have another person that wants to join the guild. We'll name him John. So now John pops up in here, but John doesn't have a character yet. So let's go into character here. And if you remember, we have to be kind of careful here because we have the player ID, which is a foreign key, and the role, which is also a foreign key. So down here we have two things that help us with that. We have search roles. So we can use this, and we can just type in the player name. Oh wait, this is roles. My mistake. So let's say damage. We want damage. Oh, but that's not in there. It's actually called something different. It's called DPS. And that'll automatically put it in there with the right name. And then for player, we can type in John. And that'll give us the correct player ID there. So we'll just come up with a name. We'll name him Barbecue. And we'll say he's a fire mage. Oh, he's probably higher than level 0. We'll say he's level 35. It's still new. So now we can actually go over here into character mode. And this basically just swaps everything around so that we have the character names up here instead of the player names. So if we do Testy here, he's got quite a bit. Strongface has quite a bit. Oops. We'll bump the transaction up and we'll do a quick test, make sure everything looks good. Long Johnson. If I remember correctly, I think that's Tommy. Yes. So we'll take a step back here for a second. And if we actually peek in the transaction database here, this blue one is the one that happened before I started this demonstration. And here we can see all of the transactions that have happened so far. If we go into raid here, this gives us a new dialog box. This is where the DKP multiplayer starts to come in. So if we go ahead and we do 100 DKP, and we pick everyone who participated today. We hit OK here, and I'll say successfully gave DKP to however many players. We can close that, and if I refresh this here, we have some more transactions. So you can see here that one of our guys, 1-1, which is the banker, got an exceptionally large amount there, and that was just because he has a special test role in the system, which gives him a 100 times multiplier on any DKP that he earns. It has to be specifically earned through the raid menu, though. It doesn't work if you're just doing a transaction. So we'll go ahead and we'll do the one last menu that we have here, and this is search. So this lets us search for any transactions that happen within a specific date range. So let's do yesterday through today. And down here in the console, we can see a whole list of all the transactions that's printed out down here. This one's transaction number 59. We can see it right there. And it looks like everything lines up just how you'd expect it to. And that pretty much wraps things up for now. Let's see. So, if you have any questions about any of the code or anything that I went over, feel free to leave a comment on the YouTube channel that this is uploaded to, Mr. Taipu1, or you can shoot me a message on Blackboard. And if you're interested in taking a look at the source code yourself, you can go to this URL here, https. You can read it. And with that, I'll see you all later.